Jerry Brown here with Jerry Brown Travels.
Lori here.
Well, it's Look Back Monday time. And what do I mean by that? What we are doing, Lori, we are showing our viewers that maybe are new to our channel.
Yeah.
And we have made 600 videos, and maybe you haven't had the time to look at them. So in the next few weeks, we're going to be showing you videos that are in our archives. They're in the safe. They're in the special place that we've kept them, especially for you. Now, on Friday at 5 p.m. California time, we're going to show our regular videos on what we're doing on a weekly basis. So we're trying to give you 2 videos a week now, temporarily, to give you a little better idea of Mexico and living here, what you can expect. We hope you enjoy this. Make a comment also, huh?
Make a comment, thumb up, or subscribe. If you didn't subscribe yet, please subscribe.
Yeah. Jerry Brown here with Jerry Brown Travels.
Lori here.
Do you think you would like to move to Mexico? Do you think Mexico is a paradise? Well, in this video, we're going to bust up some of those myths. We're going to tell you a little bit about Mexico, and there is such a thing called culture shock and what it is like actually living in Mexico. We're going to give you some other ideas about
Culture shock.
culture shock, living in another country. It's not only Mexico, it's other countries too. And we're going to have an interview
With Beth, so we're gonna exciting to go see her and interview her. She's gonna show us about the culture shock, see what is, happening here.
So what I want to do right now is I want to introduce Beth to you. And Beth has lived throughout, like I said, Central America and South America. So Beth, give us a little information about you. The other thing, Beth's a writer, and give us some background information. So as an example, tell them what countries you've lived in and how many years and all of that background.
Well, I love to travel, and there is a huge difference between traveling, visiting, and living. So I've lived 12 years in Ecuador, 4 years in Peru, 4 years in Costa Rica, a year and a half in Panama, and 6 months in Venezuela over a 20-year period. So I did really learn the hard way that there is a big difference between living and traveling. Well, I'm going to tell you my first experience with culture shock, which is about 30 years ago when I moved from Paris to Lima, Peru. I don't even know what I was thinking, but that was a huge culture shock. So it was pre-internet days, but I had never heard the term culture shock. And when I was sick every day and very uncomfortable and could not sort out what this culture was all about or what I was actually doing here, it was a really rough time for about 6 months. Had I known that culture shock is a real thing and there are ways to adapt, it might have been a bit easier for me.
Yeah, and that brings a good point. You may think that you wouldn't have culture shock. You think, well, you've traveled around the world, you've been to other countries, but it's different, isn't it, Beth, when you live in a country. Also, if you're coming down for economic reasons only, you're going to have a tough time because you're only looking at the economics. But if you come down with the spirit of adventure and that you want to embrace another culture, you want to learn about their language, you want to learn about their folk lore, dancing, their history, and in that you then have a richness of living in another culture. But if you're coming down only because it's cheap, you're going to be frustrated. And I wouldn't even recommend it because you're just going to leave and you're just going to be frustrated. What do you think about that?
I think that although it's understandable that many people north of the border today are having a hard time in retirement, at the same time, economic reasons are not enough reasons to leave your home country unless you really have come down here and visited several times first.
That's good.
And done all the due diligence that you need to do to see that a life for you could really work here.
Let me give you one example what culture shock is. I made an appointment with the plumber yesterday at 10 o'clock. I called him again today. I made another appointment today at 10 o'clock. He never did show up. To me, that's culture shock. What about that? What do you think culture shock
Well,
is?
I don't get the money. I don't understand how to make change. It's really difficult, and I really don't know how much of a tip I'm supposed to leave at the restaurant. It's all very confusing to me.
Yeah, and I have some dietary issues. The food is an example. I don't eat hot, spicy food. They have a tendency of throwing that in there. My stomach says culture shock.
Well, the traffic laws here are all just a suggestion. You can never tell what the next guy is going to do. So I get very nervous out in the traffic, especially.
Another thing that happens, maybe it's 5 o'clock in the morning, maybe it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and all of a sudden you'll hear a band go walking down the street. I mean, noise just going off, rockets shooting up in the air and stuff like that. You wake up, you're not sure what it's going to be. It is a celebration here in Mexico. Culture shock. Those are some of the stuff that we're going to talk about in this video. What other things? Yeah.
Well, I don't understand a word she just said. Somebody just rapid fired off to me in Spanish a bunch of directions for something I'm supposed to do, and I don't get it at all.
And what's interesting, Beth speaks Spanish, and she doesn't get it. You take somebody like me that doesn't speak Spanish, it really gets confusing. I mean, down to simple things like ordering a meal, and stuff like that. And so it's a challenge at times. A lot of things that we're used to, as an example, the internet. Very slow for me down here, and that's a little frustrating. I don't know if that's culture shock, but it definitely shocks me that I can't have my program being uploaded real. The thing what happens is people come down, they come to another country, and it's just not Mexico. It's all countries, especially in third world. But they expect the standard that their country has to be the same standard in when they're visiting another country, and it's not the same standard. A lot of times you just have to be patient. You have to be mindful of what it is, and just accept their culture. As an example, like I said earlier, the way they don't show up on time, and it's because their family means a lot to them. So if they have an emergency or they have a situation with their family, that's going to come first. My plumbing problem isn't that important to them, and so that's a cultural thing. We have in other videos, we talk about banking and setting up a bank account. It's not as easy to set up a bank account here as it is up north. Your medical care down here, it's got great medical care, but you have to learn a little bit about that. You may want insurance. Remember, you cannot collect Medicare if you're eligible for Medicare, so that you don't have here. So there's other things by living in another country. I mean, simple things like getting your mail down here. You have to learn little things of how that all works in here. And if you're not patient, if you don't want to really embrace the country and you're only coming down freaking up, those things are going to really frustrate you. They're just things, and even little things like, as an example, driving. My gardener, he's 55 years old. He just got his car. He doesn't have a driver's license. He never went to driver's ed. He has no idea how to drive. He just gets in it and it's automatic, and he just drives. So he doesn't stop, when you should stop. He doesn't look both ways. So those are things that affect you. That's part of culture shock. And you, little by little, you become more proactive. That's the other thing. You have to be very proactive.
You have to be very proactive,
Yeah.
especially if you are a single person.
Yeah.
You must be very proactive. You must get out and make friends. You must make an effort to assimilate with the community, because otherwise you're going to be lonely.
Yeah. The other thing what happens is, you were talking about one way that people protect themselves from not having culture shock.
Is to live in a gated community. Did I say that?
The people that live in a gated community and never leave, that they're trying to they don't want to embrace the culture, and so they lock themselves away. I would think that would be prison, but we like to get out and stuff like that, and so that's one way of getting by with it, but I don't think that's quality of life. If you feel you have receive value from watching this video, please subscribe. We would appreciate that. That brings up a good point. I mean, change with anything is very shocking to our system. Don't care what it is. And so when you come to another culture, then like Beth says, you're starting over. It's a new life completely. You don't have any friends. You don't know the lay of the land, the town, the bus system, or how things work. And so by being patient with yourself and taking little baby steps as you're learning it, and asking people, that's the great thing. Don't be shy. Ask people what they, the information that they have, what they do, and befriend them, and that starts to ease it, because then you don't feel left out, you don't feel alone, you don't feel isolated. And I think that's a lot of problems with culture shock, is if you feel isolated and then you get scared and that.
I think all of us could adapt here a little easier when we start feeling afraid, when we start feeling angry. That can be a bit of culture shock, and just to be patient with ourselves, take a step back and say, okay, what's really happening here? Do I need to have this situation resolved this exact moment? Or maybe I could just let it go and it could get worked out tomorrow or later. Of course, learn the language. Really, you could end up saving your life by learning the language, because maybe you're going to need some medical terminology at some point. But if you really want to be part of the culture here, you really want to have a full life here, you need to know the language. So that can take up a lot of your time in the beginning, just taking language classes and getting enough exercise and getting used to living here. That's pretty much a full-time job for the first months that you're living here.
Also, thank you, Beth. Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Beth, for your insight on culture shock in Mexico and other places. I know that you've given our viewers great information, and it'll be a lot easier for them. Also, look at some of our videos that we have. We talk about single women living in Mexico. We do talk about banking in Mexico. Can you collect Social Security? Can you collect your Medicare? Those are things that you can look for. I'll post some of those down below. And so, again, Beth, I want to say thank you for being part of our little video here.
And I want to say thank you to Jerry and Lori for the video and for being my friends and helping me to get through my own culture shock when I first moved here.
Yeah, we help each other. Lori, what do you recommend to people who come into another country and they don't know the language?
I recommend to use the Google Translator on my phone. If I go to other country, I didn't speak the language, and I use a lot of Google Translator. And the other thing, I use the Facebook. Then I can call my friend. It's free, no charge.
Now, do you use Messenger on your Facebook?
Oh, and then I use my Messenger to from my Facebook to send them a messenger, if I don't want to call. So that's also free if you have Facebook. It's easy for me to, call overseas with the Facebook.